Hello, hello, hello. Conservatism is policy guided by culture. Liberalism is policy guided by fixed abstract principles. Liberalism is the enemy of conservatism. Yet, the founding mythology of America, the entire spirit of the nation, is liberalism. So what do they have? Conservatism guided by a culture of liberalism? Can such a thing be called conservatism? Does true conservatism even exist in America? Allow me to explain. It's a well-known fact that America is where political terminology goes to die. So, for the handful of Yanks watching these videos, let me explain what liberalism and conservatism are and why American culture is liberalism. Classical liberalism was founded by English philosopher John Locke in the 1600s. Locke's liberalism was chiefly concerned with individual rights, limited government, political freedom, including freedom of speech, and economic freedom. Liberals believe that the best systems of politics and economics are to have different entities constantly be head-to-head to naturally determine who is best. Though this may be hard to hear for those who have been told for the last decade that capitalism is right-wing, free market capitalism is actually the economic theory of classical liberalism. These days there is also social liberalism, which has a far greater emphasis on personal freedom and tends to care less about government intervention. Conservatism, instead, was founded by Edmund Burke in the 1700s in response to the French Revolution. Conservatism is policy and reform guided by culture and tradition, and that adapts to the changing reality of the world. As conservatism is largely culture-based, it is much harder to pin down. In English tradition, conservatism is remarkably similar to classical liberalism, largely because classical liberal values were derived from English cultural values. In other cultures, the difference between conservatism and liberalism is far greater. However, the key difference is that conservatism has a great regard for culture and tradition, whilst liberalism has no interest in this beyond pragmatism. I should also say that the concepts of left-wing and right-wing were first conceived during the French Revolution, thus are predated by liberalism, and it makes zero sense to categorise the political spectrum as liberal versus conservative, but try telling that to the Yanks. When in 1776 America declared independence, it declared its belief in the equality of man, individual liberty and rights, and democracy, all classical liberal values. These same values have become so ingrained into American culture and their founding mythology that it is hard to imagine an America without them. I mean, what single value is America most famous for around the world? Freedom. Whilst the value of freedom has in part lost its original classical liberal nuance, it remains the guiding principle of so much of America. This also explains why America has such prevalent libertarianism. Anyway, with that explained, let's talk about the anatomy of American conservatism. The first group, naturally, are the cultural conservatives. Yet, as I've mentioned, the culture is liberal. By all means, write in the comments whether you think a conservatism built upon liberalism is even conservative, but I don't think it counts. It's hard to explain why, but liberalism is the enemy of conservatism. This is primarily because liberalism disregards tradition entirely. Though economically sound, liberalism utterly stampedes tradition and has little to no regard for the cultural/social aspects necessary to maintain a good civilization, and a laissez-faire attitude does not cut it, as we have seen in America. But we see this quite a lot. Plenty of nominally conservative Americans, politicians or otherwise, who talk about preserving the classical liberal values of America and the economy, but happily shill out to the megacorporations who are revolutionarily turning American culture on its head. It is like they want to build the best ship in the ocean, but have no idea where the ship should be sailing. Again, the difference between classical liberal values and conservative values in the Anglosphere are very subtle, yet they are still vitally important. There is also the second type of so-called conservatives, whom I shall call the religious conservatives. These people take the Bible as their moral guidance and try to use that in their conservatism. This somewhat lacks the capacity for reform and technological adaptability that authentic conservatism absolutely has and needs. The beauty of classical conservatism is that nothing is prescribed or dogmatically fixed. which is why it works so well for so many different cultures. If, however, your Bible is unchanged since the day it was written, that certainly makes it a stiff prescription and severely limits your ability to respond to new challenges such as the internet or smartphones. I should also point out that, in the extreme, religious traditionalism would create a society of Amish people, not a functioning modern civilization. This also applies to the third type of so-called conservatives, the traditionalists. These people typically desire to return to a glorious vision of the past. In America's case, this is usually the 1950s. I mean, I can't blame these people, of course. Statistics and basic observation clearly show that America only started to decay culturally in the 1960s. However, again, the policies that worked in the 1950s would not necessarily apply to the modern day, simply for the fact that we live in such a different world, technologically speaking. And look, I'm not saying there is no value in traditionalism. In fact, I think there is tremendous value. But more than traditionalism alone is needed, and pure traditionalism is not conservatism, as I've said in my video about Qing China. All said then, the so-called American conservatives are a mix of liberals and traditionalists, which leads me to make the very controversial assertion that authentic classical conservatism simply does not exist in America. It is only the Yanks' dismal understanding of what political terminologies actually ought to mean that has preserved the illusion of conservatism. The entire political discourse in America is absolutely fucked, and this, I believe, is a large part of why. I only wish that our own people would stop viewing the world through America's broken framing. Anyway, thank you for watching. This video is doubtlessly controversial, so please feel free to let me know what you think below. Like, subscribe, and God save the King.